Hello everybody, welcome. My name is Megan. Today we have a beautiful inspiration. It is a watercolor themed or inspired heart. Now today's inspiration, we are going to be using acrylic paints, but always for these classes, use whatever materials and supplies you have at home. This tutorial today is a quick overview of all the steps. Now I want you to pause the video and take your time as you need a little bit more flexibility in between each steps. So just if I go a little fast, I just want you to know to slow down and enjoy the process. This is a specialized video to highlight the steps and for you to take your time in between each in itself, okay? So welcome everybody. It's such a pleasure to be here. And just a big thanks to our friends at AARP Vermont. We would not be hosting these live and recorded creative sessions without their support. So a big thank you to the team. I encourage you to check out all of the AARP Vermont resources and other upcoming classes. There's so many wonderful things for you to, one, be aware of, and two, participate because they have a lot of great stuff to offer. But we'll go ahead and jump in. The supplies that I have for today's class is I have a small plate to put my paint on. Now I am using acrylic paint today, and I always use the basic colors of red, yellow, blue, and I have black and white to lighten things and darken things more easily. I also have a set of brushes, small, medium, and large, just to apply color. I'm also painting on acrylic paper. This is 11 by 14. So always in these classes, I encourage you to use whatever supplies you have at home, whether they're watercolors, acrylic paints. Sometimes folks like to use those new colored pencils. Always join us. Our inspirations are designed for you to pick and choose, what is drawn to you from a medium perspective. So today I'll be using acrylic. I also have a small paper towel to wash my hands, kind of clean up if I need to. And I have a cup of water to rinse my brushes. Now, to begin, in addition to my paints, I do have a small pencil. So if anybody has a small pencil handy, feel free to grab that. If you need to pause the video to walk around to grab any of these supplies, I encourage you to do that. But what we're going to do is we're going to be sketching a heart in the middle of the page. Your heart can be big or small. And I like to do a little bit of placement. So I'm going to do a little bit of a dot at the bottom with my pencil for the bottom of the heart, and then a little dot at the top. And this is going to allow me to connect and shape my heart. I'm going to do my best to get this as even as possible. That wasn't too bad, but it takes a minute usually. Now I'm going to do a nice dark outline so you can see my heart for demonstration purposes. See, I have my finger at the bottom. It kind of allows me to follow my eye to bring my heart starting here and coming out and around. So I want you to take a few minutes, as much time as you need to sketch your heart, and then pause the video. And then when you have your heart sketched, restart the video. Okay. Now I'm inspired. Maybe I'll add a couple other smaller hearts. That might be a fun thing to do. I'm just being fun today. So maybe I sketch a couple other hearts. Let's see here. Maybe I'll do one over here. You don't have to do this. I'm just having fun, just doing something a little different. I always try to be lighthearted during these classes, and maybe I'll do a little one right here. I always try to be lighthearted and do different designs here and there, just for you to think outside the box. In the original class, I had just one heart, but I thought it'd be fun to add another. And I'm just going to add one more little one here because, hey, why not? So you're going to have your own ideas and designs as we get going, okay? So take a minute, sketch the hearts. Again, one heart or many hearts. It's totally up to you. And then we're going to jump right into this. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to mix, once you have your heart sketched, you're going to mix paint colors. So I'm going to do red hearts. So I'm going to get all of my paint ready first, and for the heart in particular. So I'm going to do a little bit of red paint here, which you can see. And then I'm going to put a little bit of white paint on my plate, just so I have it ready, just in case. A little bit of white paint, just to do any lightening or softening if I need to. And then if I may want to make like a little bit of a pink, And I'm also going to grab a little bit of blue paint. Because if I want to make like a purple heart or like make my red a little more purpley, I can add a little bit of blue to my red, which will be fun. So I'm just going to put a little bit of blue paint over there. Perfect. So we're going to focus on doing the interior of the hearts first. And again, I'm just going to show you these basic steps, and I want you to pause the video as you get going. But please take your time and pause the video as you need to slow down, okay? All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to play with water in today's class. So we are going to, I have some paints ready to go. These are acrylic paints, nothing fancy. If you happen to have long sleeves on, roll up your sleeves. And then what we're going to do is we are going to use a little bit of water on our brush to kind of wet the canvas, to play with a little bit of a water technique. Now what I'm going to have you do is if you have pencil lines like me, mine are nice and dark, I encourage you to erase your pencil lines softly before you begin. I don't want you to have dark water lines, or dark pencil lines like me. But once those pencil lines are erased, I'm going to paint inside of one of my hearts. Water. I'm going to do water, wet brush water on the inside of my heart. Now I'm going to keep my lines a little darker so everybody can see my shapes for demonstration purposes only. But you can see I'm painting inside of my heart. Now I'm painting on acrylic paper with water, so don't use too much water, otherwise it won't dry very well. So I'm just doing a little bit of water and kind of just filling in one of my hearts with water. Now some of you might just have one big heart, that's totally fine. And then I'm going to take a little bit of my red paint and I'm just going to go around the edges and you're going to see what happens. It's going to start to bleed in. Now if it's not bleeding in, you can take a little bit of extra water and help it out a little bit. You can use a soft brush. There we go. It's starting to flow a little bit more. Isn't that fun? So if you need to kind of help bring the pigment out, if you didn't add enough water, you can kind of move the pigment, bring in a little bit more just to see the flow. So this is just a really fun technique on using acrylic paint with watercolors. So I'm going to go around this whole edge here. I'm going to go around the whole edge of the heart. And I'm getting some really funky designs. And I'm going to let that dry and I'm going to see what happens. It's going to dry in some really funky, unique ways. And I'm going to let it just spread and have fun. I'm going to go in and paint some of my other hearts. So the thing is you can use as much or as little paint as you wish. I'm going to rinse and repeat this step or technique with all of my other hearts. So some of you may not have other hearts, it's okay, but you can play with bringing in a little bit of paint pigment. And I'm just going around these hearts. You can pick and choose what brush you use, but I'm just having fun. Look at that. That was a fun one. That was different. A little bit of paint. I could use a smaller brush if I wanted to. And you could just dab in a little bit of paint just to see what happens. So this is just a really fun, unique, inspiring way of just applying color, acrylic paints a little bit differently with a little bit of water. Now, one thing I'll mention is I do have my canvas lying flat down. I don't have it up on an easel today. So this is just a demonstration of one way of filling in your hearts. And I'm going around the edges and I'm letting it all fun and fuel to the interior. Now, if you want more of a bleed of color, you can go and grab a little bit more water. And if you want a little more contrast, you can add a little bit more paint pigment. So a little bit more paint on your brush. These are all your choices as an artist today. So it's really fun to play with all the different ideas. So you can see this one has like a nice heavy thick rim. Isn't that fun to show you just something different? And this one has some heavy areas and lighter areas. And then this one's a little bit lighter. So I love demonstrating this just for you to see what can happen. I may take a little bit of blue and a little bit of red and just do a little bit of some darker colors here. So maybe a little bit of the darker purple along the edge. That's really dark, but you all can see what I'm doing here. That's all right. I'm just going to embrace it. Look at that purple, and it's all fueling in here. So what if I put a little bit more red? What will happen? Right along my purple. Ooh, look at this. Look at these nice colors. So I'm just going to add a little bit more water and just see what happens. Art is all about experimentation, and I love demonstrating that in these classes. Isn't that fun? So I'm doing a nice smooth edge on the side of my heart, trying to stay right within the lines. But you can see, try bringing in some secondary colors. Maybe this one wants to have a little bit of an interior heart. So art can be anything. This is all experimental, so it's really fun. You can use a smaller brush. You can use that big brush. It's totally up to you. But look at the dark colors. Isn't that fun to see how those dark colors are moving around? You can see kind of where the water is pooling. It's really fun just to kind of see what happens and watch the water flow. So you don't need technically, watercolor paints to do fun blending exercises like this. You can always use a little bit of acrylic, and that's one of the fun things that we're trying today. So I might bring in some of this dark purple into some of these down here just to see what happens. So again, take your time with this recording. I encourage you to try adding in a couple different colors, whether it's blue or red. I'm going to let those dry. They're really fun. They're different colors. You can see different techniques. I have one more little heart at the top I'm going to fill in. All right. So I have some water there, and then I'm going to go grab a little bit of the red, and I'm just going to put in a little bit of the red here and there, and it's doing some really cool pooling. And I'm just going to brush off some of the water, and I might grab some of this purple and just touch a little bit of this purple in different areas and just let it dry. I'm going to let all of this dry. I'm going to keep it flat. I'm going to be really patient. So I encourage you to take as much or as little time as you need just to do a first pass on some of these details, okay? And then when you're ready for the next step, I encourage you to restart the video and we'll jump into our next step. Now our next step is going to be based on filling in some of the background. So I'm going to do a little bit of water around the hearts. So I'm going to leave a white space around some of these hearts. And I'm going to start with water. And my water's a little pink. It's okay. I'm going to do a little bit of a quadrant down here in the bottom. And I'm going to stay away from these hearts because they're probably wet still. So just stay away from these hearts. Have a nice white space around these elements. And I'm going to do a little bit of, you could do a blue. I might do blue. So I have water down here, a little bit of water. And you can apply your background in any way that you want to. But I'm just going to do a little bit of a blue line here and a blue line up. And it's going to start to spread. And I'll move this up so you can see it. And I can add a little bit more water. See how it's spreading? That's so fun. This is spreading down. I'm going to go around this heart. But you can move this blue paint around. You can start to fill in a little bit. You can play with adding in different techniques. I'm just adding in a little bit of the fun background. So I'm just going around these hearts. The important thing is to not let your background color touch the edge of your hearts because we don't want one color to bleed to another. So I'm going to go right up to the top, and I want you to play with these steps. Go nice and slow, and I'm just giving you these steps for demonstration purposes so you can enjoy this just in case you missed our live class. So pause the video, take as much time as you need, and I'm going to just fill in a little bit of the water up here, and I might do some of that purple up here. Let's see what that looks like. A little bit of my reddish purple. And I just mixed, that's really fun. I mixed a little bit of my blue with my red to get this purple color. And you can just put some on and just let it dry and see what happens. It's really fun and funky. You can use your brush to kind of commingle one color with another. Look at that, that's really fun. I just added some kind of fun flair. So I love experimenting in these classes. It can be scary for some people that are not used to experimenting. We don't typically do like a lot of abstracts like this, but it's really fun to try new things. But look at these fun colors. I'm going to zoom up a little bit so you can see some of these details, and I'll bring this down. So what we're doing is we're just filling in the background. That is the goal of this step. And the way that I'm doing that is I'm doing blue here, and I'm doing a purpley pink up here, but I'm going to switch. I'll do blue here, and I'm going to do blue up here. I'm going to do the pink and purple here, and I'm going to do pink and purple here. But I always start with that base coat of water, and my water's getting a little pinky, and that's totally fine. Then I'm going to do a base coat of water, and we're going to go around our hearts so they can dry, and it doesn't bleed into the background. So you should have a white padding around those hearts, protecting you from the background that we're doing. So I'm just doing water on water. And go slow, try not to touch those hearts. Otherwise they will bleed. So I'm just doing water here. I'm actually going to do the water coming down. I'll do the pink and the blues alternating sides like I just shared. So we're going to do a little bit of the blue up here. A little bit of the blue paint, and you could do blue and water kind of mixed on your plate if you wanted to. You can get a little water on your brush and just move things around. Just a little bit of a water just to move things and shift things. That's always fine. But it's always fun to see how and where colors will shape and form. Now, one of the things you may notice, you may have some pooling of color. I have a little bit of pooling of red here. I'm just going to grab my paper towel and just do a little bit of dabbing. Anywhere that's really wet, that's having a hard time drying, you can just take the corner of a paper towel and just do a little bit of a dab, and it'll pick up and suck up some of that extra water. See that? And then it'll be less dark in that area. So you can decide how much of that or how little you may want to do. There we go. Perfect. So I pulled up some of that color, and you can see it's just on my paper towel here. So I'm going to keep that handy. That's one of the reasons why having a paper towel is so handy. So I'm going to continue with some of my background color. I'm going to grab some of this pink and red, and I'm going to bring in the water technique down here. I'm going to fill this in all around, gently around these hearts, right? I want there to be a little bit of a background color around these hearts. But you can play with how much pigment you want to come in. So if you want there to be some some blue spots, you can bring in a little bit of blue spotting here, here, and here. This is a really fun technique to kind of watch them bleed out. There we go. Spread. Add some texture. So this is just some fun techniques you can try. If you don't want the spotting, you don't have to do that. I always love just showing you different things though. And then I'm going to grab a little bit of the red and the pink. So if you wanted to do any of that red or the purple areas, you could do more of that down here. And you can decide what brushes you want to use. It's totally up to you. I'm just being really playful. It's really fun in these types of classes just to try new things. Play with moving around the paint pigments. If you don't like something, you can use a wet paper towel and kind of wipe it up. So that's always okay. But this is just kind of a fun background. You could paint on gently and softly. So you always have choices in these classes on how you can manipulate your colors. this and that, but you can see that spread out pretty cool down there. And then I can maybe add in a little bit more. I could do some drops. There's also splattering that we can add. So we're having fun with the background here, and then we're letting our hearts dry. Okay. And I'm just grabbing a paper towel. Okay. And then I'll show you what it's like if anybody wants to add a little bit of the red splatter. You can get some water and red paint, and I could just do a little bit of splatter down here, which is kind of a fun thing to try. I'm just doing the red splatter in the red areas. So if you wanted to add a little bit of extra texture, you could do that. Really fun. If you want to add a little bit of the red splatter in the blue too, that's fine. So it's going on pretty lightly because I have water. So the less water, the more dark it will be. But if you have more water, it's going to go on as a light red splatter. So this is really fun and different. I'll hold this up a little more closely so you can see it. Now my canvas is pretty wet, which is fine. You just leave it flat and let it dry. So there's some fun splatter designs just to show you. But again, today's class this recording is meant for you just to take your time doing each step. I'm here to demonstrate each step, but I want you to take your time to play with the background, play with the colors, etc. Okay. So I think the background for me is just really, it's simple. There's a lot of fun colors. If I wanted to add any more fun contrast, I could totally do that, but I could also just let it dry for a minute. That's okay too, right? I can always just let it dry. Now there's other elements I'll talk through as you're working. Now this type of art project, it could take you an hour, it could take you 2 hours, it could take you 3 hours. So just take as much time as you want, just to be transparent. But try to enjoy the process. That's a really fun part of it. And then the other thing I want you to consider is there is like floral elements or like little flowers that kind of pop up and out. But we want to make sure that the painting in the background, everything is dry before we do those elements. And they're typically around our hearts or around the underside of our hearts. So I'm going to be really patient and just give this a few minutes to dry before I do the next segment. So if you want to get a hair dryer, if you want to just wave your hand around, if you want to do any blotting, that's fine. But feel free to keep working. And then when you are ready, you can restart the video when your background around your flowers are dry. So this background you've created, when this is dry around your flowers, I'm gonna add some cute greenery to add a little bit of foliage behind my flowers, which is going to be really fun. Foliage and stems and maybe some little flowers. We'll see. We'll see how it goes here. So this is pretty close to being dry. I have a little bit of a wet area here. So I could just do some gentle blotting to kind of help it if I wanted to. It picked up a little bit of blue paint, but that's not too bad. If you do any blotting, there is a risk that it will pick up paint, but don't worry too much. So we're not going to be painting on top of our hearts. We are going to be painting around our hearts, which will be really fun. And one of the things I want you to think about is you could use a pencil if you wanted to, but I'll do a couple of demonstrations and I'll zoom down just to show you. So you could do a couple of petals. You could do a couple of swirls. Could do some long grasses. So I'm just going to use my pencil and I'm going to just do a little bit of sketching. And I'm going to do them kind of all around this main heart. I'm doing it here and I'm doing it over here. And I'm going to come in with green paint and I'm going to make it look a little bit more realistic. Now you as the artist, you can do as much or as little as you wish here. You're going to see once I start painting what mine looks like. And I'm just going to do just enough. So as that's drying, I'm going to go ahead and make a green paint. To make a green, it is blue and yellow mixed together. It's really yellow with a little bit of blue, but you can control. And I'm going to do this as a little bit of a darker green. And I'm going to use a smaller brush of choice. So I'm going to bring a little bit of blue and yellow together. And I could just use more blue to make it kind of a darker green or more of a tealish green. So you can pick and choose what colors you want, but take a minute to mix the green. And if you're still working on your hearts, or if your background is still wet, just pause the video and just join us when you're ready. There's no rush. But I'm using a little bit of water. Sorry, I'm using a little bit of yellow and blue paint to find a green that I like. And that's a pretty nice green right there. I could add a little bit more blue. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to paint in some of these petals. Now I'm going to outline them so you can see them first. So I'm going to outline them so you can see some of my ideas. So there's some petals there. And I have a little bit of a petal here, a little bit of a petal here, here, here. And I'll probably get a smaller brush to do some of these down here, but I'm just showing you some of these shapes. So you see I kind of went under my heart and I'm creating a little bit of a bouquet, a little bit of a floral kind of package behind and outside of this heart. See that? See how it's really visually quite centered? I did that on purpose. I'm doing a couple curly cues, but you can see I'm keeping the foliage here, and then I'm creating some spaces for these leaves, and then I can fill them in. So you can see visually I've added some of these green leaves and things behind, which is kind of neat, right? And maybe I keep it as simple as that. One way to fill these leaves in is with a little bit of water and a little bit of green paint on your brush, and you could just fill them in ever so lightly. One way to do this, right? There's a million ways to approach today's art. You could clean off more of the paint if you want the middle of these to be a little less, contrast. But you can kind of fill in, if you want to fill in some of these white nooks and crannies, you can go right up to the heart if it's dry. If you want to go right up to the heart, you could. See how I'm going right up to this heart? This heart is dry now. See how I'm just filling in? Oops, too much water. If you ever use too much water, just grab your paper towel and just do a little bit of dabbing. That's totally fine. So a little bit of water, and I'm just going to fill in while the green paint is still wet. I can kind of move that paint around and fill it in a little bit. You could also just make a lighter green. You could use any color green you want to kind of fill in. So this can be as simple. This is a pretty simple approach to filling this in. Maybe mix a little bit of yellow and a little bit of green. Any way you want to fill in this greenery, you can do that. It's quite fun. This is a little bit of a yellow and a green just to add a little bit of brightness. And you can see I have this tucked right up against this heart, and I'm actually going right around this one. So I'm going to do that visually so it's consistent on either side. Some of you may have these secondary hearts like me, some of you may not. So your foliage on your other heart can kind of just come down, but this is just a cool visual for you to make some of those choices. But again, I want you just to kind of flow through this process. Consider what greenery you may want to add. In the original class, I was alternating adding a little bit of blue and a little bit of green. I'll show you what that looks like. So if I have a little bit of blue, I can tuck in a little bit of blue. Look how cool this is. A little bit of blue tucked in to some of these leaves, just as a little added shaded dimension. So you could try that. Art is so different. So you can really approach this design, adding in what colors you want and where. But I'm just tucking in a little bit of blue. But in the original class, what I did was I did a little bit of green and blue. I did a little bit of green. I did a little bit of blue. I did a little bit of green, a little bit of blue. And I'll grab the inspiration to show you that. So this one looks a little different, but this was the original class. So I did really nice, delicate outlines. There we go. And then I'll do outlining after. So you can see I did some nice outlining. I did a little bit of this. I did a little bit of that. And I then went and did outlining after. So this is more of like a basic structure first, and then I can do some outlining with a smaller brush after. So I'm doing the underlining colors now, and then I'm going to come in and do outlining, which I think was really fun to do that. So I'm going to let this dry. Again, use blues, use different colored greens. I can even use a really tiny brush if I want to do any more fine detail. So this is a more of a fine point brush. If I want to come in and take my time to do any more more thin lines. It's a great time in our class to do that. Nice thin lines. So just change the size of your brush if you want to use more thin lines. There we go. So I'm just using the tip of a more thin brush to add some of those more thinner lines. And I'm going to do that consistently on the left and the right side of the page for it to be visually balanced. But again, a big thank you for you all being here. It's such a pleasure to have you a part of today's class. I encourage you to follow and if you have any questions, use the YouTube comments below. I'm happy to answer any questions you have along the way. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to let this dry, and then I'll come in and do some more detail work. Now, what I'm going to have you do is take your time. I want you to be happy with the background, and I want you to be happy with some of the detail around the heart as well. Now, one of the things that we did in the other class is I'm going to make a dark purple, and I'm going to do an outline around the heart to make the heart stand out a little bit more. It really gives it a 3D effect. So I'm mixing a dark purple, and I'm going to do this while all the green is drying. So I'm using a small brush, and I'm making it have a nice fine point. And I'm going to use my hand nice and steadily. And if you don't want to do this, you don't have to, but I'm going to show you. I'm going to do a nice thin purple outline around my entire heart. Now you can decide if you want to do this or not. It's totally up to you. The painting would look fine without it. I'm just showing you an example for you to consider if you decide you want to do it. And in these classes, I'll always show you different tips and techniques, okay? There we go. There we go. So you can see that's just a little bit of a gentle outline. If I wanted to be a little wild and crazy, I could take a little bit of my water and just soften this in. If I wanted to, you can kind of soften in some of the purple. The acrylic dries pretty quickly, so you may or may not have the window to do that or not. But if you wanted to, you could add in a little bit of shading to the edge by bringing that purple in. See that? How it just kind of takes it and it blends it in just a little bit. You're adding in just a little shading. It's going to draw the eye to the middle. The other things you can consider is bringing in a little bit of white to your painting. If you wanted to bring in like a little bit of white splotchiness here or there, you could bring in a little bit of white. You can do some smudging with your fingers. This is a great part of the class to do any experimentation. So I'm just doing some kind of fun dots, and I can do some smudging with my finger just to bring in a little bit of highlighting. So if you don't want to do this, you don't have to, but I always love just showing different things to consider for our classes. And I'm just going to create a little bit of a V here. And I'm just going to let that dry. So that's just like a little way of bringing in a little bit of highlighting. I do like the contrast down here, so I might bring in a little more contrast down towards the bottom and just smudge that in with my finger. So there's lots of ways to play with the colors for today's class, but I encourage you to pause and take your time as you go. Now that everything is dry, I can take a smaller brush and I can come in and do some detail work. So I'm going to grab a smaller brush of choice, and I'm going to do some detail work around maybe the outside of some of the hearts as well as the leaves. Now, if you're not ready to do any of the detailed work, don't worry. Just go at your own speed, but I'm going to use a nice small brush of choice. And I'm going to use a blue to a dark blue purpley color here. If I wanted to, I think this nice bluish purple is a great choice for any outlining. So I'm going to spin that paint on my brush just like this, spinning it on the side so it manages the paint on that. And then I can come in and I can just do some really gentle, delicate outlining of some of these petals. Now, they don't all have to look the same. You can just add in a little curve here or there. If you don't want to do any outlining, you don't have to. It just adds a little bit of extra depth to the painting. So maybe I'll just do on the inside or the outside of these hearts. You can just tuck in a couple of fine lines. If you don't want to do any, pure outlining of leaves, you can just improvise. But I do like doing a nice thin dark line on the outside of the heart here. Bringing it down. It just draws my eye towards the center of that heart. Now, if I don't like the way that looks, I can always take a little bit of a wet brush and kind of blend it in a little bit before it dries to kind of create a little bit of a shading. And then I can always let it dry. I can always put a little green over that. That went on a little heavy for me. So I can always touch this up, look, and just put a little green on top easily. With acrylic, things dry really fast, so you can easily come in and touch things up. It's no problem. So I could easily soften this with a little bit of green. So there's a lot of ways to make updates. So I'm going to leave that darker color as is for right now. And I can come in and on the outside of those leaves, but I'm going to come in and make sure each of my hearts have a nice, clean, dark line around each of those. So I'm going to use a nice thin brush, and I'm just going to do a gentle, thin outline around each of my hearts. Now, this is something you don't have to do. I'm going to show you what it looks like, and you can make a choice if you want to do this or not. It would look totally fine without it. But I'm just going to show you so you can see what it looks like, okay? In every one of these classes, you always have choices you make as an artist, and this is just one of them. Now, doing a thin line will look different than a thick line, so keep that in mind. There we go. So it's going to have a different look and a different style, which is absolutely fine. Right? So everything's going to look a little different from, one painting to another. So just embrace, whatever styles you want to go with it for your own. If you wanted to bring down the tips of those hearts a little bit, you could make the bottom of the hearts a little pointy. You can use dark or light green colors for any accent details, for any of these flowers, any of these greens. I kept mine pretty basic, but this is the point of the class where you can do as much more or as little as you wish. So if you want to add more contrast to any of your hearts, so I have some red contrast here. If I wanted to make that any more of a red contrast, I could add more. But I want you to take and just reflect on your work, and you're going to realize, where you may want to spend a little more time, where you may be happy and you may not want to touch. So it doesn't hurt to like walk away and come back to it. So enjoy this process. I hope that you have been able to slow down and enjoy each step of this class today. Playing with water with a little bit of acrylic paint is so much fun because there's so many different things you can do with the blending of colors and this and that. So I want to thank you all so much for being here today. I want to thank you, AARP Vermont, for all your support in our creative classes, and I hope to see you all again soon.